So last month I told you that my wife and I were going, the next couple of days we were going to leave for a journey to Henry County, Indiana in search of my Patriot, John C., who was supposed to be buried on his farm, basically where Louisville is, right off of the Highway 40. And the short of it is we were successful. And this has been a search that started with my grandfather and then was continued by my dad. And I feel very good that I've kind of put this search to rest. And even I created a book of this odyssey that I have printed for my children and for my grandchildren. But John's journey, and I think I presented maybe 4 or 5 years ago about the Go West, Young Man, Go West, the westward migration of my family, starting in New York to Albany, Pennsylvania, to what is now West Virginia, Lewisburg, West Virginia, to Indiana, Illinois, and being one of the first settlers in Iowa. And in fact, my grandfather was born in 1909 in a sod cabin on the eastern plains of Colorado. So very much western migration. But John's story really starts in 1763, the end of the French-Indian War, just before Dunmore's War. And the seas are settled right there in what is today Lewisburg, West Virginia. So it's kind of the bleeding edge of the West. And Chief Cornstalk and the Shawnee of the Ohio Indians don't like it. And so they come down with 80 braves and start picking off all the settlements that are through there. And it was called the Muddy Creek Massacre of 1763. And in that massacre, John is 6 years old. His father's killed. So basically, I'm looking at the spot where his father was buried. There's a monument there now. You can see it's kind of in disrepair. My wife, who's journeyed with me through cow pastures and old historical societies and ancient libraries to help me find this kind of stuff has been great. But I've documented and been there where the Muddy Creek Massacre happened, and John, as a 6-year-old, was captured. He and his family, his older brothers, his sisters, his mom, are taken up to what is today Chillicothe, Ohio. And they are there for until Dunmore's War. And they are part of the prisoner release of Boquette's march into Ohio to try and keep the Shawnee Indians out of the Revolutionary War. And so they are part of that prisoner exchange. Although John is not. John actually runs back to his Indian family. At this point, he's been living with them for 2.5 years and has been adopted. And so it took a fur trader, to actually get him back a couple of months later. John and his brothers, then of course, are a part of building Fort Randolph at Point Pleasant. This is why Point Pleasant is very important to me. In fact, Michael C., one of his older brothers, his name is on one of the plaques there. He's killed in 1792, so this is after the Revolution, but he's killed by Shawnee Indians there at that fort. Of course, just a couple of years after that is Fallen Timbers in Indiana, and which is 1794. And so you can see that John spends the winter at Valley Forge. He's on the roll call at Valley Forge. He fights at Battle of Monmouth, Battle of Germantown, at Stony Point with Wayne, then comes back to that Greenbrier area, and then as the Northwest Territory is starting to turn into states, I can see that this family is starting to look west. And so they're moving up towards Ohio, they're crossing over into Indiana, and in fact, this is where our research at the Henry County Historical Society was something else, because somebody took the time to plot the landowners of 1822. So Indiana just becomes a state in December 1816, so basically 1817. By 1818, the C's are arriving there, and this is in 1822, And these red marks are the land owned by John and his sons. One of his sons is actually John Jr., who's actually buried in our family cemetery in Grinnell, Iowa. He keeps moving west. So we were able to find that they owned land there, and then in reading some of the documents, this is where it became really interesting, is because Phyllis and I are sitting there going through files and everything, and all of a sudden I'm looking down at this letter and I'm like, I kind of recognize his handwriting. When was this written? And it's November 1975. I'm a sophomore in high school then, and I looked to see, and it's written by my grandfather, Joe C. He's writing the Henry County Historical Society, going, here's this guy I'm looking for, and as far as I can find, he probably ended up there. What can you help me find him? And so for just finding that letter was absolutely incredible. But then what we came across was the Nugent Farm Cemetery. Now, Nugent is the last name of somebody who married Peggy C., one of John's daughters. So this is a family cemetery. And what is commonly called Nugent Farm Cemetery is located on the Thomas Nugent Farm on US 40 at section 25 of Franklin Township, Henry County, Indiana, about 1/2 mile west of the town of Louisville. The original name of this small burying ground, if it had one, is not known. Now here's where the story gets interesting. On Halloween night of 1960, it was destroyed by vandals who scattered the stones through Louisville, the community. Fortunately, the inscriptions had already been compiled by Mr. R.T. Mayo, Nightstand. At present, two stones remain piled near a fence just north of a large barn near a fence. The original cemetery site is now a cornfield. I was working with the state president for Indiana because I thought, oh, maybe we could do some kind of a grave marking service there or something. And then he put me in touch with their person who's in charge of all of the state grave markings. And this will be tough to see, but he actually sent me a picture that somebody had taken at that point of two of those stones stacked against the corner of the barn. And so that I just found that really really interesting and sad that is what had happened. So so Phyllis and I are there at the Historical Society there at Henry County, and we're like 30-minute drive. Let's drive south to find that farm, and we did. And so I got my picture taken. Phyllis took my picture in front of the farm where it actually is. So somewhere out in that cornfield is where that cemetery sits. That cemetery was. And so what I learned during this process is that getting a historical marker, whether it's from the state or from any other source, is very complicated, very expensive, and even with all of this proof, they were still like, well, can you go to Indianapolis and look into the newspaper archives to find an article where they actually wrote something about that Halloween night? And I'm like, oh my God, no, I'm not doing that. This is, I don't know how you get any more proof than this. And so I'm kind of, my wife will tell you this, sometimes I just kind of like take matters into my own hands. And I just went, so we have a family cemetery in Grinnell. My father, my headstone and my wife's headstone is already there. Although the date of death's not on there. But the headstone's already there. My father's there. My headstone, my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. My great-great-grandfather is just a little ways away. And then my great-great-great-grandfather, John Jr., who was John's son, followed when the phrase "Go west, young man, go west" was said. Many people think that Horns Greeley is the person who said that. And it said that the person he said that to was J.V. Grinnell, founder of Grinnell, Iowa. Grinnell's fame is that Grinnell College is the first college founded west of the Mississippi. It was the first football game. Grinnell College, which is a Division III school, actually beat the University of Iowa west of the Mississippi. But when he said, "Go west, young man, go west," John Jr., that is exactly what he did, and was one of the first pioneers to be in Iowa. So you could see them being the first, so once the Northwest Territory is beginning, the states are beginning to be formed, the C family is selling, packing up their sticks, and moving to the next state, and going west. But then how I took kind of the matter into my own hands is Smith's Funeral Home is the only funeral home in Grinnell, and they've been burying our family for generations, and I've worked with them, and I've paid for a granite marker in memory of John C., and I actually own the plot next to Phyllis and I's headstone, and that is where it's going to be placed as soon as it's made. So, and you can see I had already done kind of a flag ceremony for my dad. That's our flags right there. My last trip out to Grinnell. So I'll be going west to Grinnell at some point once that's done to do that. I wish you were closer so you could come out and do the taps. But again, this has been I think the research and just finally putting it to rest and finding it was a lot of fun, some frustration, but I wanted to share it with you. Questions?
How was your ancestor reunited with their family after being adopted by them?
So, right, so it is said that his younger sister, who was not 9 at the time, was actually kept by Chief Corstock's son and became a part of that group. So after they were ransomed back, they all ended up back with like aunts and uncles because the family had just kind of been dispersed. So they ended up with aunts and uncles. John was fairly young. I mean, his mom was 48 at the time, so she wasn't exactly young. But you know, and I didn't share this with you. She was tough. You want to talk about something that's tough. So in that journey back to Ohio, she became known as the Fighting Squaw. She actually had to run a gauntlet. So Simon Kent is not the only person who ran a gauntlet in Chillicothe. She did it, and the description of her picking up a stick and then whipping around as she was going through it, I guess she was. Like here I say, we are not descended from fearful men or women. So, any other questions? If you could get a chance to do something like that, go for it. Because it could be
When
fun.
your ancestor was taken, was that from Pennsylvania or Ohio or what?
No, so they were right where Lewisburg, West Virginia is today. So if you look on Lewisburg on the map, it's right there on the West Virginia border, way south. But at the time, that was like the western bleeding edge of where the Europeans should have been. And so Cornstalk, they come down with 90 Braves, and there were other little settlements through there. But the Muddy Creek Massacre was one of them, which now when you think about when you're at Point Pleasant and you think about that battle, that was a battle between West Virginia militia and the Shawnee, and you can imagine that most of them, at least from the C family, were like, oh, we're going to get our revenge here.
Well, thank you, Alan.